The Middle East, a region marked by decades of simmering tension and unresolved rivalries, exploded into open conflict in June 2025. For years, Israel and Iran had been locked in a dangerous dance, each side testing the other's limits, but never crossing the line into direct war. That changed in an instant, as the world watched in disbelief while the two regional powers clashed openly for the very first time. Years of shadow warfare, proxies, cyber attacks, covert operations and constant threats suddenly gave way to direct, unmistakable conflict. The digital battlefield, once hidden from public view, now spilled over into the streets and skies. The immediate trigger was a series of bold, coordinated moves by Iranian-backed militias. These groups, long supported and armed by Tehran, launched attacks that directly threatened Israeli security, pushing both nations past the point of no return. The world's attention snapped to the region as the situation spiraled. Israel, no longer willing to contain the threat through diplomacy or limited strikes, responded with overwhelming force. Fighter jets roared into the night sky and military convoys rolled toward the front lines, signaling a new and dangerous phase in the conflict. What followed was a rapid and terrifying escalation. Missile strikes and air raids hammered not just the border regions, but also the heartlands of both countries. Cities that had once felt distant from the conflict now found themselves under direct attack, their skylines lit by explosions. The world watched in alarm, fearing that this war could quickly spiral out of control. Global leaders convened emergency meetings, worried that the violence might destabilize the entire region and disrupt vital oil supplies, sending shockwaves through the global economy. Diplomats scrambled to prevent catastrophe, but the first days of the conflict were marked by chaos, attacks and counterattacks, a flood of propaganda, and confusion on all sides. Newsrooms raced to keep up as events unfolded at a dizzying pace. For civilians in Tel Aviv and Tehran, the war became terrifyingly real. Air raid sirens blared through the night, families huddled in bomb shelters, and uncertainty gripped entire cities. Everyday life was replaced by fear and the constant threat of violence. The era of shadow war was over. Open warfare had begun. Tanks rolled, soldiers advanced, and the world braced for what might come next. As the region teetered on the brink of a much wider conflict, Washington and other world capitals prepared to intervene, weighing their options in a rapidly changing landscape. The stage was set for a dramatic escalation, one that would shape the fate of the Middle East and perhaps the world for years to come. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. Enter the United States, led by President Trump, a leader known for his unpredictable style and willingness to escalate tensions on the world stage. As the Israel-Iran war intensified, the White House faced mounting pressure to act decisively, both to support its ally and to send a message to adversaries. With a signature show of force, the U.S. military mobilized across the region, putting its unmatched power on full display. Warships patrolled the Persian Gulf, fighter jets roared overhead, and American bases buzzed with activity, signaling that Washington was ready for action. The U.S. launched a massive coordinated airstrike on Iran's underground nuclear facilities. The operation was swift, precise, and devastating, targeting the very heart of Iran's nuclear ambitions. B-2 bombers, flying undetected through the night, dropped 30,000-pound bunker busters on fortified sites like Fordo and Natanz. These bombs, designed to penetrate deep underground, crippled Iran's nuclear program in a matter of minutes, setting back years of research and development. Satellite images the next morning confirmed the scale of destruction, craters where facilities once stood, twisted metal and shattered concrete. Years of Iranian nuclear progress were wiped out in a single night, sending shockwaves through Tehran and beyond. The message was unmistakable. The U.S. would not tolerate Iran moving closer to a nuclear weapon, especially during a hot war with Israel. American officials made it clear that any further escalation would be met with overwhelming force. This bold move changed the conflict's dynamics overnight. Newsrooms buzzed with analysis, and headlines around the world declared a new phase in the crisis. The strike reassured Israel, which saw its most dangerous adversary suddenly weakened. But it also put U.S. forces in the region on high alert, knowing that retaliation could come at any moment. By striking deep inside Iranian territory, America crossed a major red line, one that Tehran had long warned against. The risk of a wider regional war suddenly became very real. Retaliation was inevitable. The only question was how and when. Iranian leaders convened emergency meetings, and military units mobilized across the country, preparing for the next phase. Across the Middle East, civilians braced for impact. Streets emptied as people watched the news, fearing what might come next. Military checkpoints sprang up and anxiety gripped the region. The world waited, anxious for the next move. Global leaders scrambled to respond. The United Nations called for restraint, and markets trembled with uncertainty. The US had thrown down the gauntlet, making it clear that it was willing to risk everything to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. Now, the world watched as Iran prepared its response, knowing that the next move could change the course of history. In the tense aftermath of escalating hostilities, Iran struck back, targeting the U.S. Udeid airbase in Qatar with 6 ballistic missiles. The world watched anxiously as the missiles arced through the night sky, their launch broadcast across global news networks. The base, a symbol of American power and a critical hub for U.S. operations in the Middle East, was a bold and provocative target. Its sprawling runways and fortified hangars had long represented the reach of American military might in the region. But in a remarkable display of defensive coordination, every incoming missile was intercepted by advanced anti-missile systems. There were no casualties, no damage, just the echo of explosions high above the base, a testament to the effectiveness of modern defense technology. US and Qatari defenses worked flawlessly together, their joint response seamless. The US had already moved key assets and personnel as a precaution, anticipating the possibility of an attack and minimizing any potential risk. In a surprising twist, Iran had warned Qatar in advance, signaling that the attack was carefully calculated, more about saving face and sending a message than inflicting real harm. This warning allowed for preparations that ensured no lives would be lost. This calculated move let Iran claim defiance on the world stage, showing its people and rivals that it would not back down, but also stopping short of provoking an all-out war with the United States. President Trump publicly acknowledged the warning, recognizing Iran's attempt to de-escalate the crisis. His response was measured, avoiding further escalation and leaving the door open for dialogue. The exchange felt almost choreographed, a carefully staged show of strength, but also of restraint. Both sides demonstrated their capabilities, but also their willingness to avoid catastrophe. In the aftermath, both nations sent unmistakable messages to each other and the world, but crucially, they avoided disaster. The region held its breath, relieved that the worst had not come to pass. For a brief moment, the world saw a glimmer of hope for diplomacy, a chance that dialogue might prevail over destruction. The attack that could have easily sparked a wider war instead opened the door to talks, showing that even in moments of crisis, there is room for negotiation. Sometimes, even in the fog of war, signals and gestures matter more than the strikes themselves. The world took notice of the restraint shown on both sides. The first step toward peace had been taken, reminding us that even in the darkest hours, diplomacy can find a way forward. Enter Qatar, the region's diplomatic switchboard. Hosting the US base and maintaining ties with Iran, Qatar was uniquely positioned to mediate. After the missile attack, Trump called Doha, asking Qatar's emir and prime minister to broker a ceasefire. The Qatari prime minister became the key go-between, relaying US proposals to Tehran. His challenge: convince Iran that accepting a ceasefire wasn't weakness, but strategy. Iran's symbolic strike gave them political cover to negotiate. Qatar's shuttle diplomacy bridged the gap, turning crisis into opportunity. By facilitating talks, Qatar proved that influence isn't just about military might, it's about connections. Their mediation averted catastrophe and reinforced their value to the US. Sometimes, the smallest players make the biggest difference. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. With Qatar's help, the ceasefire was announced, by Trump of course, on Truth Social. He declared a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran, framing it as a personal victory. The deal was phased. Iran would halt attacks for 12 hours, then Israel would join, leading to a full stop after 24 hours. This staggered approach built trust and allowed both sides to save face. The world waited anxiously for confirmation. Soon, both Tehran and Jerusalem quietly agreed. The ceasefire focused solely on stopping direct attacks, no grand peace treaty, just an emergency break. The goal: halt the missiles, prevent regional disaster, and buy time. It was a pragmatic, transactional deal for a volatile moment. The fighting stopped, but the deeper issues remained. For now, survival and stability took priority. The world exhaled. After the ceasefire, leaders rushed to claim victory. Trump's allies called it historic. Proof of peace through strength. Even some Democrats offered cautious praise. Iran's nuclear program was hit, no US casualties, and a wider war was avoided. In Israel, Netanyahu declared a strategic win. The immediate threat was neutralized, objectives met. For Iran, the challenge was to save face after a devastating blow. Official statements highlighted their retaliatory strike and framed the ceasefire as a responsible move to prevent more bloodshed. Each side spun the outcome, but all were relieved to avoid further escalation. The ceasefire was a political lifeline for leaders on all sides. In the end, survival trumped pride. While leaders negotiated, civilians endured terror. In Tehran and Tel Aviv, air raid sirens and evacuation warnings became routine. Families faced impossible choices: stay or flee, shelter or run. Schools closed, daily life halted, and anxiety soared. The psychological toll was immense. War was no longer distant, but at their doorstep. Foreign nationals scrambled to escape. The U.S. evacuated hundreds of citizens from Israel. These hurried flights were a stark reminder of war's reach. When the ceasefire came, relief swept the region. Sirens stopped, children returned to school, and hope returned. For millions, the ceasefire wasn't about politics. It was about survival and a return to normalcy. Peace, however fragile, was a lifeline. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. War in the Middle East rattled the global economy. Oil prices spiked, markets tumbled, and investors feared the Strait of Hormuz could close. Trump's ceasefire announcement brought instant relief. Markets rebounded, oil prices dropped. The threat of a wider war had vanished, at least for now. Lower oil prices eased global inflation fears. The episode showed how tightly global finance is linked to regional stability. A missile in the Middle East can shake portfolios worldwide. The ceasefire pulled the world economy back from the brink. Peace, even temporary, has a price and a payoff. The missiles have stopped, but the core issues remain. Iran's nuclear ambitions and proxy networks persist. Israel still sees an existential threat. The ceasefire didn't solve these problems, it just paused the violence. Still, it averted catastrophe, thousands of lives, and the global economy was spared. The episode proved the value of backchannel diplomacy and the risks of brinkmanship. But peace is fragile. A single misstep could reignite conflict. The world must decide, is this a pause or a foundation for real progress? For now, the region has stepped back from the abyss. The hope is that this close call will inspire leaders to seek lasting solutions. The price of war is high, the value of peace immeasurable. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia.